Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as usual, Kevin Durso. Kevin, how's it going today, buddy?
It's going well. How's everything with you?
You know, I'm here, and that's what matters. So, as we dive into today's show, make sure you're following us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com, and make sure to subscribe on YouTube. So, okay, diving right in. We haven't done a show in a little bit here. We had some life stuff going on. It's a little off, but we're getting into our summer schedule. We're probably going to be doing shows between each round of the playoffs moving forward here. And our last show was a couple of weeks ago, and the Flyers had several games remaining.
Yeah.
And
what was there still left at that point? 4 or 5, I want to say. I think it was 5.
I don't think that they had not played the Rangers yet, so it was still 5.
Yeah, because I was sitting here looking at a realistic way that they could either win or lose 4 or 5 or something like that.
And there were some real wide points spreads available in terms of draft positioning, right? Because if they lose them all, they go to 4th. If they win them all, they go to 9th or 10th or maybe even worse.
And you and I both know that we could have told anybody they lose out and everybody would have been extremely satisfied with the idea that 4th was exactly where it was supposed to be. They get there. We'll get there in how they got there because it was a crazy situation.
Yes. Well, they decided to start by keeping the Bradshaw era fairly warm to start. I think they started something like 4-1-1.
They had just lost to, when we did the last show, they had just lost to Montreal. And that was the first loss to the point where we actually described that as Montreal realized we need points and the Flyers realized we don't. And that was the third period of the game. So for 2 periods, they were doing it again. So you got another competitive game at the very least. That's the first part. They go in, they play. I'm going to brush over some of these games because I really just want to touch on the last one for how we got to this number that's on the screen. But the first game, man, the Rangers sucked this year. I mean, and it was, and I'm telling you right now, I think, didn't I text the group afterwards something about if either like leave Peter Laviolette on Long Island or something like that, or don't take him to Long Island or something. And eventually we got there too.
Right. They have since relieved Peter Laviolette of his duties, and he will not be the coach of the New York Rangers moving forward.
Which anybody with half a brain could have seen coming. Yes, exactly.
When did I say it in November? It was definitely December at the latest. But like
you definitely did not make it past the halfway point of the season without saying it. Absolutely.
I didn't make it to Christmas. Yeah. I know for a fact I didn't make it to Christmas because I explicitly remember talking about not wanting to wish a man losing his job at Christmas, but he shouldn't have a job.
Yeah, and I mean, well, we honestly, we may have even brushed on the subject right after Thanksgiving because that was when they played the Flyers the first time, and we're like,
"That's what I'm saying.
This team does not look good.
Was atrocious.
Yeah, this team does not look good, and they've got a goalie, obviously, but the rest is kind of in shambles at the moment."
Yeah, and the Rangers did make a bit of a run of it down the back half. They got themselves back into the playoff conversation. They were floating around it till that last week. Whether they deserve to be there or not, they were. And if they made it in, you have Igor in a playoff series. Like nobody's looking at it like a fun matchup.
Oh, sure.
But yeah.
I'm partially laughing because you just brought up playoff race with them, and I'm laughing because for a little while the Flyers went on a little run of knocking people officially out of the playoffs because they did it to the Rangers, they did it to the Islanders on that following, like the Saturday that followed that Ranger game. They were not going to be able to do that to the Ottawa Senators, who were already firmly locked in by the time they played. Although, I guess I'm saying this sentence in hindsight because nobody would agree with me if I said it and something was different about this show. That was a really good competitive game for the Flyers to get it to overtime. Kudos to them for having a competitive game against a playoff team with 3 games to go. Nobody wanted it at the time, by the way.
But listen, the post-John Tortorella era.
Yes. And we're going to get into a very specific aspect of it in a second.
And we'll dive into all of it in a minute. But they showed a lot of fight, a lot of heart, a lot of desire to be on the roster next year, which is, I assume, one of the things that Danny Briere was looking for. But it's really nice to see out of this roster because it would have been really easy. Really easy. Long losing streak. Tortorella gets fired. They bring in the good cop to come be the head coach for the rest of the season. it would be
Well,
real easy to start your summer vacation a little early.
yeah, and I think you and I both know well enough at this point that if nothing had changed there, they probably would have done exactly what you just described at the
Yeah.
end. Like, it was going to be a nightmare scenario if they didn't make the coach. They hit a breaking point. They made the change,
Yep.
and that just seemed to loosen up like 5 different guys to
Yep.
do whatever. I mean, I
It
didn't
loosened
make
up the whole room.
well,
It loosened up the whole room.
I didn't really make a point. Like, there's one player we're going to talk about more than any other because he's only the future of the franchise, essentially. But you got to give mad props to Tyson Forrester for the way he played the last 9 games and putting up a goal a game. You know, including
I've been
speaking of the
shouting
Ranger
from the mountaintops.
and speaking of the Ranger game, his first career hat trick, which is awesome.
Yep.
You know, great to
Yep.
see him. You know, again, nobody wanted the win at the time, but
I've been shouting from the mountaintops for a long time on Tyson Forrester. I think he has shown some real quality. His potential has improved from where I think it was 18 months ago. Like, I think more of the player than I did a year and a half ago.
What I'm really excited about is if this is the 2 years that he had under John Tortorella, mostly, and then something unlocked as soon as Tortorella was gone, look out, rest of the league. You know, and I'm not saying he's going to be like Ovechkin scoring wise, but I think that it's safe to say given the increase he went from 20 to 25, you got to shoot for 30 next year.
I was
If you're
about
going
to
to make
say,
substantial progress.
Are you shooting for, at least early in his career here, are you shooting for kind of that prime Sean Couturier production where you're getting good shutdown minutes out of him? He's playing good defensive hockey and he's still putting up 75 plus points.
Yeah, and it's
30 goals.
There's and with the slight caveat that because he's a winger, it's going to be a little different defensive responsibilities, but he is very good at it.
He does a good job with it.
So
you know who else is a defensive winger? Mark Stone's pretty good at hockey.
He is. That's fair.
And I'm not saying Tyson Forster's that. Do not get me wrong.
Tyson Forster would need to be way more physical to
It's going to take a couple. Right. It's going to take a couple of years for him to just round out his game that much.
No, but you want to know what? I'm glad you brought that name into it, and I'm not talking about Mark Stone in this case because I need to can we all pump the brakes a little bit on the Sean Couturier stuff a little bit because he looked pretty good at the end of the season too, all things considered. And I gotta, I didn't want to pull too much from exit interviews and things like that. If I was going to pull anything, it was more or less a little bit from Bradshaw and a lot from Danny Briere.
But when your captain comes out and says he didn't really talk to the head coach,
I don't even need that. I don't even need that part. The money line in that is you feel like you're being pushed aside. You got named the captain, and then you felt like you were pushed out of the picture.
You were scratched 3 weeks later,
right? But I'm taking that more from this season than last. Like I think last season it was, I didn't understand it, but okay, it's late in the season, playoff push. I get this kind of. I think he had no clue why he was being bumped from top line to fourth line at different points and things like that, and it's all over the map. I just don't think I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that Sean Couturier is going to go out and win another Selke down the road. I'm not going to convince you of that. I am not going to sit here and tell you that contract is an absolute, complete and utter waste. It's not great. It's not great, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's not a guy who gives you absolutely nothing. I actually realistically thought that he had a better second half of the season than you really could have expected, all things considered.
I agree.
And knowing who he was playing with gives me a little bit of hope.
Well, and I was about to say, I think one of the hallmarks of Sean Couturier's game has always been that he's not necessarily the most physically gifted player in the league, but he thinks the game at an incredibly high level, and he's in the right spot. He's doing the right things. He's ABC. What do we say about Matvei Michkov? That he thinks the game at such an incredibly high level. The fact that those two work together shouldn't really surprise anybody. The Sean Couturier contract is a little pricey still, right? Like the production is still under where you'd want it to be, paying a guy what you're paying him.
But it's never going to get worse either.
Well, right. And the cap is exploding, right? We know about that over the next 3 years. That contract, I think I saw a graphic when Neil Pionk signed.
Yeah.
That that $6 million today, that's what he signed for, right? It was 6.
I'd have to go check the exact number.
It was either 6 or
know it's
7.
I know it's a big time comp number for Cam York that I
Well,
remember seeing
and
a lot of.
sure, and but with where the cap is at in
Yeah,
4 years, that's going to be the equivalent of about $4.7 million today, right? And so
sure.
Sean Couturier's number would obviously be a little higher, maybe it's 6.5,
He's,
something in that
I would
neighborhood.
say he's going to
But
end up being
that
a five
number
five
is
and a half million
crazy,
dollar. Yeah,
right? And because
we
he
thought
is,
7 was under 8 was
yeah,
crazy at
exactly.
the time he
But
signed it.
right, but because he has done such a good job of transforming his game, frankly, and he
Hmm.
now he has accommodated his game to suit the injuries he has sustained in his career. He has slowed his game
Sure.
down a little bit, smartened his game up even more, and that is the kind of thing that makes your career sustainable. Like you can play like that longer than you can play a style that relies on your physicality.
Well, and as much as you bring up that the quality that he shares with Michkov and that the way you think the game, Michkov thinks it so fast sometimes that
Almost too fast at
right.
this point.
Well,
Yeah.
exactly. And Couturier even self-admitted, I'm not exactly a fast guy. Like in all, really kind of in all facets. I'm not the fastest
Fleet of
skater.
foot is not
Right. Fleet
his
of foot
right.
is not his quality. I got that.
Not in his elite
And I
prospects
think,
page.
yeah, of course. But I think that's part of the adjustment is I've had to learn to think faster with him out there because he's going to start to do it. And you've got to also factor in the invaluable part of having somebody like that basically be your on ice teacher. I mean, how
Right.
many times have we caught he goes over and he handles something with Michkov? You can't go,
Yep.
hey, can't do that in this situation where,
And it's
remember that.
and it's a guy who spent the first half of his career cutting down the NHL's
Yeah.
elite.
Yeah.
So like he knows how to do it, right? That was Sean Couturier. His whole Selke case was built on what he did against top guys, what he did against Sidney Crosby, what he did against Evgeny Malkin, what he did against name any top center in the league at any point in Sean Couturier's career, and he has probably locked them down pretty effectively.
You know what's interesting too, because obviously he had the things to say about Tortorella at his own exit interview. Did you see that? Like Brad Shaw said something along the lines of, "From him, I really learned what a pro is." Like that, was there anything I didn't expect? I learned what a pro or did I expect, or did I learn anything from him? Yeah, I learned how a pro operates because
That's your captain. Yep.
Sure, and it makes a lot more sense. Like I just don't think that the hate is warranted as viciously as it is sometimes. Like
It never is. It wasn't for Claude Giroux. It wasn't for Eric Lindros. It never has been.
well, no, you know what? You know when it happens like that? It happens when you have a higher bar. People set a
Yep.
higher bar for you, and you just
Oh,
aren't able to. And I want to see what happens now because, by all accounts, okay, he played. He had a
okay.
decent year. It wasn't great. It wasn't, not spectacular. It wasn't terrible. Now what? Now what without the typical, we've always had this conversation with him about, well, now he needs to rest in the offseason and heal up and we'll see where it goes. I don't, he finished the season looking pretty good, all things considered. I wouldn't say that he's the type of guy who has more than the typical bumps and bruises kind of thing.
I think he continues to recover from
yeah.
the severe injuries he sustained a couple of years ago.
And
Like
I think he's
it takes
adjusted to
time,
it better.
right? Well, and it just takes time for your body to regain muscle mass and perform at a high level. Like we talk about how much weight players lose during games,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like sustaining that day to day during the season is hard enough. Bulking up is impossible. It can only be done over time in the off season with proper nutrition. And like he's in the process of that.
Sure. So I want to shift gears to the last handful of games because to a certain point, they're still doing exactly what nobody wants to see happen. They've lost one game in regulation. They've gotten points in every other game through the Ottawa game at this point.
Yep.
It's like, oh, yeah, of course this is what we're going to do. They fired the coach. They won 3 straight. They did lose a game. They won the next 2. They got the third one to overtime. This is not how this was supposed to go. 5-1 and 1 through 7 of the 9
we were hoping for like a 1-5-1. Come on, guys.
And then because you should have been right. about this. You should have been right about this. By
Okay.
some miracle, the game on that Tuesday matters for Columbus. By some miracle. You were telling me, I don't
It
think it's
been
going to
so
matter.
good.
And you're telling and sure enough, it actually did. And sure enough, after a certain point, because I didn't think they looked great in the first period. They
remembered.
One of the best names in hockey right now, Jet Greaves, who took care of business in the first period. So the rest of
stood on his brain.
The rest of the Columbus Blue Jackets could figure out what needed to be done, and then finally step in and do what they had to do. So they win that game 3-0, and it's like, okay, great. Columbus keeps their playoff hopes alive. Great story, by the way. Let's see what happens the following day. And the Flyers lose the game and
do their part. Yep.
Well, do their part. And this is just, again, a slight little bit of validation on my part for saying, because I was starting to fear it too, where I'm like, yeah, I said it last week when we did the show. I feel validated. They're right back where they started. They're right back in that odds. And now, like, everything is on the table here. And that last game, because one of the things I did say on the last show, and I found the clip where I said it, and I even mentioned it was going to be for my own sanity more than anything else, was please don't let that last game of the season matter. And it mattered. And now, but the validation I feel here is that I tried to tell people all the time, nobody is going out there and sitting here looking up at the board and saying, we need to lose.
They're all going out there to put their numbers up.
Yep. Exhibit A, the Boston Bruins, who had it sitting right in front of them. It was their last game on Tuesday. All they had to do was lose the game with no points, regulation loss, and they get the fourth best odds, and they don't leave the door open for somebody else. Yep. And they got 1 point to get it to overtime, which was just enough to make the Thursday game carry meaning the other direction. Hey, if the Flyers lose in regulation, they get the spot. And that last game was completely insane.
Oh, I've never been that much of a Buffalo Sabres fan in my life.
You would be rich or it's a drinking game idea, one or the other, but you would be rich or really wasted, honestly, if you counted the number of times during the course of the game, in particular the third period, that I said, you've got to be kidding me. Because you couldn't.
It was a really good game, 82.
You couldn't make up some of the stuff. First of all, the first period couldn't have gone any better. Like, on your way out the door.
3-1 after the first, Michkov has one.
Not only 3-1 after the first, but on the way out the door on another season where your power play is just abysmal, you give up a shorthanded goal to boot. It's like, yes, that is the recipe that you wanted. And then the second period was exactly the same thing. They traded goals, right? I think is what it was. So it was 4-2. And you're like, okay, you're looking at a 2-goal margin going to the third. And they scored 15 seconds into the third period.
The second that happened, I went, "Oh, are you kidding me?"
To immediately inject fear and nerves back into the end result, because for now you're chilling with it. It's the classic. The clock is your friend, but also your biggest enemy at the same time.
Absolutely.
And then from there, because now it's 4-3, you have all of the moments. Couturier nearly ties it. The thing is about as much over the goal line as you can possibly get without it fully crossing to be a goal to tie the game. No goal. Okay, they didn't tie it. Buffalo comes down under 4 minutes to go. They score. They're going to take a 2-goal lead with under 4 minutes to play. That should probably be it, right? Except the Flyers challenge it, and it gets called back. So it's still 4-3. Then you get to the goalie pull situation. Oh, here we go. The Flyers might have a chance to tie it. They don't tie it. They give up the empty net goal. And you're thinking, that's it. Okay, that'll actually do it. 5-3, under a minute to go. They're going to get the fourth best odds. And then Bobby Brink scores with 18 seconds left.
You have to clinch up one last time.
So it's now a 1-goal game again. And as you're doing this, like, you're really thinking, they're going to do this. They're really going to find a way to do this and move into 6th instead of 4th. They didn't, thankfully, which is why we can now shift our attention to this and our production value here.
Absolutely.
This is a lot of fun, I know. The lotto balls are already spinning. We're waiting for this moment. I believe
I've been on Tankathon every day.
As far as I know, the lottery is May 5th. I did see a possibility it's May 6th. I think it centers around whenever they start the second round, I believe. So that's why. But there is your next important date, everybody. May 5th or 6th or whatever it may turn out to be. But there's your next most important date, because the Flyers have a 9.5% chance to get the first overall pick. And what this is not this isn't the chance for first overall pick, by the way. This is the chance to move up, supposedly. San Jose has a 25% chance at 25.5 at number one.
Yeah, there's like 2 lotteries. One's for the second pick.
Right. So
the whole thing.
That's what weird. That's what this is. This is the chance of winning one of the 2 lotteries.
Right. And then there's another drawing.
And for everybody else that is not the San Jose Sharks on this chart, the numbers are exactly the same for both lottos.
Okay, so
the Flyers have so bottom line, the Flyers have a 9.5% chance of winning a lottery and getting 1 or 2, and the worst that could possibly happen is 6 if they drop 2.
2 teams jump them.
Right. Yeah. 5 if they drop 1 or they stay at 4. You really are hoping for a win, or 4.
Neutral, yeah.
5 is not detrimental because at least it keeps you in top 5. 6 really isn't either, honestly.
Sketchy. Well, right, because it's the top 6
it's
drafts,
about,
right?
It's kind of that, and they're going to have their own chart anyway, so you don't know what they're thinking. Like, I don't know that, like, as everybody, like, when everybody talks about whether it's a 5 or a 6 draft, or how many players they think are really key players that are at the top or whatever. I don't know if they're factoring in late risers, some of the changes that get made, like all that type of stuff. There's always, there's usually always one guy who kind of plants himself in the middle of the top 10 that everybody didn't have there at the beginning of the year. And then sometimes crazy things happen. I wasn't going to say him. I was going to say, like, he goes 3rd overall last year. Beckett Seneca.
Beckett Seneca. Yeah. Crazy.
Because at that point in time, it was like, that was the name everybody thought they were hearing at 3rd overall. Not a guy who's playing playoff hockey right now.
Right.
But you get my point. So this is the bulk of, like, the whole offseason right here, essentially. Like, this is what'll determine a whole lot. We await this, obviously. Those teams on the right-hand side are kind of the non-factors. They're the ones who more or less
spike. Don't say that.
Well, but more or less can't really jump you in a way. Like, Calgary can't, Vancouver can't. I believe those are the only 2 that can't jump you physically, but, like, if you were sitting at the top, they can't. Utah can't, Columbus can't. Couple of little notes, though, about some of those picks, by the way, or some of those teams that are on this graphic here. Because you want to know, there's something here that applies to the Flyers later that these percentages don't matter on, which would be the Flyers have that 4th spot, right? Then the Anaheim Ducks have the 7th spot. That would put Columbus in the 13 and Calgary in the 16. Those are all the Flyers' 2nd round picks. So they all fall in the top 16 of round 2. And those can't move.
48.
Calgary's is going to be 48. Columbus's is going to be 45. And Anaheim's, by virtue of, not that anybody was paying attention to this game on Thursday night, but by virtue of a Pittsburgh regulation win over the Washington Capitals, knocked it back into 40. So the Flyers essentially have 5 picks in the top 40, or 8 in the top 40, or 7 in the top 48, and 8 in the top 68.
Yeah, so 7 in the top.
7 draft in the top, is your Super Bowl.
Good.
And draft day is your Super Bowl.
Well, right, because, like, only one of them is a premium pick, right? The rest of them are all 25 plus. Like, they're still good. They still have a lot of value.
Well, maybe, because we'll get to the playoff talk in a moment, but
sure.
You're all really big, if you're listening from the Flyers perspective anyway, you're all really big Stars and Kings fans right now.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you got a really good night on Monday night.
Yeah, but those teams also have to win in the 2nd round, so it's not, there's more to it than that.
No, they don't. What do you mean?
Playoffs only reseed the draft order only reseeds the conference finals, does it not?
Well, no, I didn't think so. If the teams were out, then It does. Then I thought it
I
did.
believe it's just the top 4.
Oh, maybe it is then. So
Yeah,
if it doesn't
I
matter,
believe 29, 30, 31, and 32 are the final 4, and that's it.
I thought it reshuffled itself just based on who was out first. If it was an
I'm not
upset, but
sure.
maybe it's not.
I'm pretty sure it's the
there would be an
yeah.
there's an easy way to check.
Yeah.
Because it would be just what was the order last year?
Fair enough.
You know.
Regardless, you have 7 picks in the top 48. Only one of them is really that premium, uber blue chip. So I do think there's a really good chance that Danny Briere gets creative with the other 6. I think you could see some packages, some moving up, some moving down, maybe bigger trades that just happen to involve those picks. I
Oh, for sure.
I don't expect the Flyers to select 7 times in the first 48.
No, I wouldn't. No, don't expect them to select 7 times. That's not it.
I don't know if I expect them to select more than about 4 times, frankly. I would not be surprised if a significant amount of those pieces are moved.
Right.
I think there's a reasonable chance at least one of them is, well, second round pick this year for a second round pick next year, or 36 for a late, a first from a good team next year, like something like that. But I certainly don't expect them to make all the selections.
Yeah, who knows at this point? They might keep them all. So like, this is, and this will be a good time to start to shift to some other stuff that we have lined up for everything else at this point, because kind of the idea of what does this offseason look like, all that type of stuff. I want to start before we go to that. I did want to start with this guy because we really
I
need
didn't
to
see this
him.
graphic in the pre-show. That's a nice one.
That's he's not, like, I hate to break it to you, he's not, well, and everybody knew this anyway, but he's not going to win the Calder. Sorry.
He's not winning the Calder. No.
But I see, and this was one of the things I was thinking about during this last game of the season was I love the fact that, I love the fact that he finished the year with that kind of game, and that happened that way, even though, like, they got the result they wanted, but he got that kind of performance that you cap it off the right way. He gets, we had said before breaking 60 points was already going to be something substantial because he didn't look like he was going to. So you get to 63 and 80 games, knowing kind of what he went through, like the back and forth of being in, being out, limited ice time sometimes. That's very impressive for one. And then to lead the team in goals when all is said and done, it's almost, like, to me, that's substantial because he wasn't even supposed to be that guy. He wasn't the goal scorer per se. He was the playmaker, and it was supposed. And then when you looked and you went, well, Travis Konechny's clearly got all the goals right now.
Right.
And now he's a guy who did not have a good second half, obviously.
No.
But that's where that starts, and it's like Michkov just kept kind of staying around in that category and had his, and had his moments and had, 2 more goals to show for it. And I, like, when it was sitting there at 4-2 against Buffalo, you're like, this couldn't be going any better. Everybody's loving this result because they're losing the game. The kid's having a killer night to close out the year.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, like, does a night like that to finish the season with 3 points, 2 goals, take the team lead? That 26, by the way, is not just the team lead for the Flyers, but it was the rookie lead in the
rookie
NHL.
Lead in the NHL. Yep.
Is that enough to put him back in the finalist ranks?
I think
that bumps somebody.
So, man,
I think it depends on how much you care about goaltending.
Well, I was gonna say, see, it's not even that. To me, it's not so much how much do you care about goaltending. It's the Calgary Flames didn't make the playoffs.
Well, I agree with that. That's what I mean by that. It's
right.
Do you sit there and say they just missed the playoffs, and if it wasn't for the goalie, we wouldn't even been talking about them? Or do you say they could have been there, they didn't make it, we just brush aside the goalie and look at these 3 offensive-minded players? There's one who's gonna win it, but the other 2, they were pretty much neck and neck.
I think that's what's likely to happen. I don't necessarily think I agree with that. But I think that might be what ends up happening because offense sells and is flashier. And
Sure.
listen, let's be totally honest. I think having the Philadelphia Flyers are one of those franchises that having one of their players up for a major award has some buzz throughout the league. That means something. And
Yes.
even though we all know he's not going to win it, having him in, man, I hate to be this blunt about it, but having his name in the article will lead to more clicks than having Dustin Wolf's
Yes.
name in the article. And that is
It
no
will.
disrespect to the Calgary Flames or their fans or Dustin Wolf. Like I said, I think if I'm a hockey writer and I'm attempting to vote for this impartially, because I think that's a
Yes.
writer vote, right? The Calder. I
Yes,
think
it is.
I think I would be able to put aside the fact that I love Matvei Michkov. Hello.
Of course of
And
course
and vote for Dustin Wolf because I think in my heart of hearts, Wolf, Celebrini, and Hudson are the three. Now, again, I think Mishkov might end up there, and I won't be sad about it. I'll retweet the graphic from the NHL. Don't get me wrong,
I know.
but it doesn't mean I agree with it objectively speaking.
I know. And here's the thing. I like because I'm with you on this. I'm with you on that
Yeah,
part. I'm to believe at this point. I think that well, Hudson's probably winning the awards. Of course, he's a finalist. I think
yeah.
Celebrini's a lock as a finalist now.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely
And I
agree. I think
think that
that last spot is Wolf or Mishkov.
right, and we'll just see what they decide, and that's why I'm saying I don't know. Did Wolf go down the stretch a little too quiet because the team faded a little from the playoffs for them to say, look at what he did in those 9 games after the coaching change, we'll put him back in. Let's just say either he's going to make it and he's not going to be the winner, obviously, and you get a little consolation prize for being a finalist, or he's not going to make it at all. And I don't know what's going to be better because if he doesn't make it at all, the motivation's through the roof.
Well, right, and you think about Claude Giroux not getting nominated for the Hart Trophy with a 102-point season. And
Yeah.
that he has talked about the fact that has served as motivation for him moving forward from that. And
Well,
if something like that were to happen here, I think it would be the same. And I think
well,
he
and
would want to get his name on a Hart Trophy before Celebrity Hudson or Wolf have a chance to sniff
sure.
it.
And here's the thing. I didn't even, like I said, I didn't want to touch on too much of the stuff from exit interviews, but
Yep.
he said he wasn't satisfied with his season.
Yep.
He's sitting here telling you there was more. I didn't give you what I wanted. We're all sitting back looking, going, you just played under defensive-minded head coach John Tortorella for 71 out of 73 that you got into. And you weren't held back completely offensively. Like you still put up okay numbers, had your stretches, had your learning curve, hit a wall, did all the things, but we're mostly going to come out on the other side. And then you rebounded at the end of the year to have just this point surge that gave you very respectable numbers as a rookie, still learning so much. And, you go from, and you're telling me that wasn't good enough. Like, I've got another gear and I wish nope, I've got more.
Was that Russian
I
work
could have,
ethic coming through?
that sounds
He's
like a
never
guy.
gonna he's never gonna be happy, and that's a very good thing for Flyers fans.
Sure.
So
So let's shift
I have
to,
to ask you. Well, real
yeah,
quick before we shift off, I have to ask you.
yeah.
The hype going into the season is he's the best rookie since Lindros. Is he?
Now you're going to make me look up like rookie records
Yeah, I am.
because,
Well, I will say, as far as capturing the attention of the city, no doubt. No doubt.
right. Well, and see, that's more or less what I was also talking about a lot was he's one of the most impactful.
JVR had a great rookie year. I stand by the fact that he should have won the Calder, but he didn't.
That JVR
And
should have. JVR's rookie year. There was somebody bigger in there at that time for sure. No, I feel like who you're talking about is
Patrick Kane, was not.
well, that's who he was drafted with.
No,
but Kane
You're right.
played
That's
right
who he was
away.
drafted. Right.
because JVR went to college for a couple of years.
Right.
And then
right,
debuted. His rookie season was 09-10. Yeah, so like the catch is like depends on what you want to call like hype from a rookie, because like, well, and Lindros still would have been after this, but you could have sat there and said there was hype about, from a goaltending standpoint, hype about Hextall and Lindbergh and all that stuff when they came in. I mean, I'm not finding another guy's numbers from that range of anything other than it's Lindros and Renberg.
Yeah, because Lindros put up 40 goals his rookie season, which is silly.
Like the next rookie that I can find that you could sit there and say, hey, this guy was pretty good in his rookie year, and put up points, but I don't even know if the hype was there. He turned out to be a really good flyer, but Simone Gagne?
Okay.
Like from a production standpoint, I mean, not even Gagne had in his rookie season played the same, this is ironic, the same number of games, 80, 20 goals, 48 points. It's not 26 and 63, you know?
Nope.
And
now it was dead puck era. There's arguments to be made,
well,
but
sure,
no,
that's
it's not
true.
the same. Right.
But I'm sitting here saying like Jeff Carter, 81 games, 23 goals, 42 points.
Yeah.
You know, actually, they were all rookies at the same time, weren't they? So RJ Umberger, 73 games, 20 goals, 38 points.
Man, that
It's
Phantoms
nice.
team from the year before was crazy.
Right.
Okay.
Mike Richards, 79 games, 11 goals, 34 points. Like that, those were common.
Yeah.
That was common rookie numbers. This is as close, like just Michkov alone. He's eighth among rookies in franchise history with the 63 points.
Right.
And then you're looking at the company that's in front of him, and you're going Barber, Prop, Lindros, Poulin, Renberg, and Renberg just jumped right into a lineup that had Lindros in it.
Right. It turns out he played with some pretty good players.
And actually, that's not even fair to just go like, hey, he just jumped in there and Lindros was there. It was Lindros and Recchi and Brindamore. Like,
absolutely.
They had some offense to them. So he put up a point per game. Actually, it wasn't point per game because they played more games that year.
I haven't mentioned Eric Desjardins in a couple of shows. So since we're talking about that team, I'm going to shout Eric Desjardins out.
Well, you're shouting. Well, now you're shouting out a guy who was acquired for one of the other guys that was on their team when Renberg was a rookie.
That whole era blurs together. It's fine.
Oh, it's all good. All right, let's go into more of the offseason stuff here, because let's talk. We got these two guys on the screen. We're gonna, focus in on probably the two biggest things that happened over the course of this, which is, or that are to happen, which is whatever the guy on the right does and whoever is.
I'm not gonna lie, you did Brad Shaw dirty with this picture here. If you're not watching on our YouTube channel, check out the YouTube video. Brad looks like he's in the middle. Brad looks like he's in the middle of catching you cheating on your history test.
He does have a teacher vibe to him in this picture.
He's in the middle. He's in the middle of going, hey, stop looking at her paper.
That he looks like your high school science teacher.
Absolutely, he does.
He's gonna teach me physics.
Absolutely.
Anywho.
Anyway, if you're not watching on our YouTube channel, we have Brad Shaw and Danny Briere on the screen. Obviously, kind of the two front-facing people in the Flyers organization at the moment. Danny's got a lot of work ahead of him, and where do you think Brad Shaw ends up as the Philadelphia Flyers head coach next year? And if not, do you think he stays on the staff if he's asked?
Okay. I wasn't going to, with this show, talk about this because I didn't think we would have as much info on the coaching search as it seems like we kind of do to a degree.
Yeah, we have implied information.
So here's what I'll tell you, and it hinges on the obvious at this point, which is a certain someone becoming available.
And it certainly seems like Rick Tocchet is going to become available.
I mean, I'm almost prepared at this given moment, based on everything that seems like it's out there, to handicap that thing as 50% Tocchet, 50% the field.
Yeah, valid.
And right now, in the present, the field would be 25% Brad Shaw, because I do think they were very impressed with Shaw. I will say that. I'm not convinced he'd be the guy who comes back.
Yeah, and he may stay. And I think if Rick Tocchet stays in Vancouver or chooses to go somewhere else or whatever, then I think Brad Shaw becomes a supremely viable candidate. And I think a lot of the smart money would go to him.
Yeah. So I look at it and I go, so Shaw's got a case. Obviously, they would be interested in Tocchet. like I need to see I need to see somebody else kind of emerge in a way, like right about now. The only other
I saw some stuff that said that David Carl is not particularly interested.
I don't know what to make of. I'm not saying what to make of it. Like the report that I saw is that it wouldn't be serious consideration. I don't know whose side that's saying it. Like, I don't know if it's David Carl's not seriously interested in the Flyers, so therefore it might already be off the table because he's already telling them, I'm not that interested in that situation. Let's move along. Or if it's the Flyers saying that we don't think it's serious, like something to seriously consider. Now they should, of course.
Say if it's the Flyers saying that, I have severe problems, but
right, like
we won't ever know.
But it's certainly one thing to reach out and then find out almost immediately, like, oh, he's not injured. Like if that's what it turns out to be, and it was, well, then we're not really seriously considering that guy because why burn time on an interview when
a guy that doesn't want it,
right? So sure. So I'm taking him right out of play. I will bring
fair.
Like the only other name I'm going to bring into this right now, short of lumping Bradshaw and Ian LaPerriere together because they're already there, is Pat Ferschweiler from Western Michigan, because the dots are being connected. He played with Keith Jones at Western Michigan, before Jonesy's NHL career. There's a connection there. He just won a national championship. He's a hot name on the coaching market. He's not your typical college coach because he did have experience on an NHL bench as an assistant. So it's not the same as making the jump straight from, this isn't Dave Haxtell 2.0, or whatever. It's a little different. That's the only other guy I really kind of wonder about. And here's the thing. I'm not sure how I would feel about the Tocchet situation there because I just don't know. Tocchet's not the first name that comes to mind when I think of the two things Danny Briere said he's looking for. I'll just say
that. Yeah.
Communication and teaching, and I just don't know. Like, listen, there's a fine line that you have to work with here in terms of you're never going to really make a universally praised hire in this situation. Because even if people in the hockey world rave about Ferschweiler or David Carl or whatever, there's a whole portion of the fan base that's still sitting here scarred from Dave Haxtell going, I wouldn't hire a college coach. Don't do it. I don't care who he is. Don't hire the college guy. And you're towing the same line with Tocchet because there's a line, and I'm just going to draw that line at people who are about 40.
Well,
if you are on if you're on the plus side of that line, you're probably looking for do what always seems to happen. Cater to the fan base, bring the ex-Flyer in, the Flyers Hall of Fame.
Where are the Broad Street Bullies?
And then there's people, and it doesn't mean that there's not overlap. Like there's people who are on the younger side that are going to sit there and say, yeah, do that because the other stuff hasn't seemed to work. You did, and in fairness, their last two permanent head coaches, they did try this. Alain Vigneault, John Tortorella, yeah, it didn't get you where you wanted to be, and they were complete outsiders. Actually, last three full-time guys then, because Haxtell was too. So,
well, yeah. No.
So your last true old boys club guy was Craig Berube, who was still,
and even he picked it up on an interim basis to start. And then what people kind of, I think, forget about him to a degree was still kind of marinating in the head coaching role until well after that he was behind the Flyers bench, and then turned it into won a Stanley Cup in St. Louis, and he's still coaching playoff games right now as opposed to the guys who have coached the Flyers lately. Hey, you're forgetting about the very memorable and very successful Scott Gordon tenure.
No, I'm not, because I loved Scott Gordon behind this bench. I love Scott Gordon as the Phantoms head coach. I thought that era was great for Phantoms hockey, by the way.
I really think there's an alternate universe where if Ron Hextall doesn't get fired, Scott Gordon ends up as your head coach one day.
Possibly.
But anyway, not relevant.
But anyway, like, so I know how people are going to take it. there's the crowd that's on the other side of the 40 that's going to sit here and go, and here's exactly what I'm going to lump this in as, because you can either be, you choose which area you want to focus in on. The 5 years in a row of missing the playoffs right now, the last 12 to 13 of not having a really successful playoff run, essentially, or the last 50. The choice is yours on which one you want to focus in on, whether it's the recency bias of nobody's making the playoffs right now, don't do that thing that you always do. The last 13 years have been like this. Don't keep going down that path to,
I think a lot of people our age are in. I think a lot of people in our age bracket are in that bucket where the last 12 or so is really the tough part, because there's just never been a clear direction.
Right, and there's people who would throw it to the other direction, because one of the things I said about Rick Tocchet from kind of the beginning was, you have two guys in the organization now, in Keith Jones and Danny Briere, who have both more or less said the exact same thing about taking the jobs they did, which was, I know how great it can be, and I'm here to restore that. And one of your big criteria when you're interviewing a head coach that you two finally get to pick. You didn't pick John Tortorella. Keith Jones was broadcasting games when Tortorella took over. So you didn't pick that guy. You just go with it because you're the team broadcaster.
Yep.
You get your chance to pick somebody. And is one of your criteria going to be find a guy who comes in here and goes, yeah, I also know. And that's not to say that John Tortorella didn't know, but it's no, I know.
It's different.
Right. And you could have done this with a number of people. You could have done this, if Craig Berube was available and you sought him out again to bring him back. Could you sit there and say, I know
Absolutely.
Right? If it was Rod Brindamore who suddenly entered the market, you could do the same thing and say, hey, you remember what it was like in the 90s, right? Yeah, help us get back to that. That's what we're trying to accomplish. And Rick Tocchet has the entire duration of the 80s to go off of with that, and a portion of the early 2000s.
Well, and I wanted to bring it back to that portion in the early 2000s.
Because of who he played
with.
Yeah.
Who did he play with?
Yeah, sure.
The guy currently looking for a head coach. Okay.
But that was the same reason I connected the dots to Firschweiler. Because it was like, hey, he played with him at Western Michigan. He's always pumping Western Michigan, Hey,
Of course.
I'm going to tell you right now, when were we finally back up there again? I guess it would have been the national championship was that Saturday. I think it was, or was it the Monday night, actually?
I think it was the Monday. Yeah.
So we were up there Tuesday. And there was nobody beaming. Right. There was nobody with a bigger smile on his face than Keith Jones about Western Michigan.
To be fair, on most nights, there's nobody with a bigger smile on their face than Keith Jones. Let's be honest.
Yes, because he's usually cracking a joke in the process.
He's just a boisterous guy.
Yes, but I'm saying he was thrilled about the fact that, and now that you put in that situation, it's a guy he played with at Western Michigan who coached them to the first national championship in program history.
I'm sure Rexy's in South Jersey was having a viewing party for that national championship game. Some of the old guys there.
I'm just saying that at the very least is outside the box enough that even though there's a connection, you sit there and you go, well, it's nobody I would have ever put money on at the start of this thing. If they went to college, we all assumed David Carl, and if they didn't go to college, we all assumed the usual. Rick Tocchet. And in fairness, you also have to factor in who you're competing with or who else is out there with a job opening. And so far, there hasn't been any indication one way or the other on the other two teams that finished with interim coaches. Boston hasn't committed one way or the other. I think they're just going into the same kind of process, much like the Flyers are with Shaw, although I don't anticipate Sacco staying or keeping that position anyway. I actually could see Chicago doing it and just dropping the interim tag, because I do think they actually liked the way the season ended.
I agree. Well, I think that situation is going to come down to Connor Bedard happy?
And I was also going to say, unless David Carl says I think Chicago sounds great, and then you just write a check. I mean, there's a lot of people pinning David Carl to Anaheim, by the way, which that was another one that's another coaching change that was like, we all knew it was coming at some point.
Yeah, very few people like playing for Greg Cronin, and that one was a long time coming.
Especially in that organization, you got that right.
Right. Well, and I think at this point, management is managing for their jobs a little bit, and they gotta put out some
You mean Pat
fires for the
Verbeek out there
players.
trying to figure some
Yeah,
stuff out? Yeah.
Pat Verbeek, I think, is starting to feel some pressure from the higher ups, and it's
You
time to
don't
make something
say.
happen. It's time to make something happen.
Yeah, I got you there. Then and obviously the Rangers have a job opening. I think the one that I didn't have pegged out of this whole thing was Seattle.
Okay.
Like, I think that every job opening that happened, there were 3 going in that had interims. Then the Rangers say, Lavi's out. The Ducks say Cronin's out. It's like no surprises here. Seattle was a little bit.
I could see them calling Peter Laviolette.
Who, the Flyers?
No, Seattle.
Oh, Seattle?
Yeah.
Do you know what I thought about with Seattle? And I thought about before the coaching change, honestly, but I'm thinking it a little bit now also. I'm just wondering when somebody decides to say, do we interview Jess Campbell?
Listen, if anybody does, Seattle is definitely going to.
I wouldn't be shocked if they do, because I think the players there do respect her.
I think if they don't call her, or if they don't interview her, other teams will. And I think whoever gets her is going to get a spectacular head coach. She's done a spectacular job.
I'm just wondering, because Seattle was already the first team to go there, how
they're
much
willing to go all the way.
Well, not even just if they are, if anybody is, because they went there with the assistant, and who knows yeah. Well, and then you got to. So then we've also got to start factoring in. Depends on who else joins this club at this point. We were talking earlier today about maybe the Islanders will. We don't know yet. That is it's a discussion to be had for the new general manager.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I guess we'll touch on the Lou Lamoriello thing now, because we don't really have any other reason.
And I wasn't going to spend tons of time on the other league.
No,
it's just a point.
Yeah, but just while we're here, interesting. Lou Lamoriello's contract will not be renewed, and he will be leaving the New York Islanders. And frankly, the fact that he's not in a coffin when that announcement is made is the surprising part.
Yeah, I guess so, isn't it?
Lou not getting dragged out of the front office it is stunning.
You mean to tell me that
I hope, frankly, that he retires.
You mean to tell me
try to get another job?
You mean to tell me, and I know that this was like, it was a big deal at the time, but it goes right off of our last show. You mean to tell me that people higher up than that weren't thrilled with the fact that the building was filled for Ovechkin? You know what I mean?
Right.
We said Lou was having a fit that day. I think that everybody else was above him, apparently.
Fair enough.
But so we're waiting to see that if Tocchet does decide to I guess they declined the club option, have made him another contract offer. If he declines their contract offer and enters the market, then Vancouver's looking for a coach. And then and then radio silence, I guess, on, there seems to be no indication that Pittsburgh's doing this. Mike Sullivan said he's only interested in coaching the Penguins until that's not his job. So as of today, it's still his job. There was some talk that Nashville might make a coaching change as well. I haven't seen any indication of that right now. So there's a couple of jobs that we all thought might be open that aren't open. And then there's also, like I said, I think Seattle was a little bit of a surprise.
Well, and we can even use this as a little bit of a transitioning point, because if you make it past the second round in the NHL, you're probably not getting fired.
Yeah.
But first round exits are absolutely vulnerable. Second round exits too, even potentially, given the situation. But is there anything else? Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to do on the Flyers, or can we transition to the playoffs?
Because a lot of the other stuff I have, we can talk about as the weeks go on. It's a lot of off-season speak, a lot of what the roster will look like.
We have plenty of time to discuss. We'll have
Right.
at least 2 or 3 shows before free agency and the draft.
And we're going to cut down on the length of, not the length of the shows, but the length of how much we talk playoffs, because there's going to be fewer rounds to talk about. So there you go.
Exactly.
All right, ready to go into this thing? Let's
transitioning into the playoffs while still kind of staying on the coaching thing here. What coach do you think is the most vulnerable should his team lose in the first round here? Because I have an answer.
All right, I'm browsing the teams really quick.
Yeah. Well, while you're browsing, I think there's a real chance that Jared Bednar's time is up in Colorado.
Wow, that was not what I was going to expect you to say, honestly.
How many times can you blame injury? Like, how many times can you blame the fact that we haven't had Gabe Landeskog? Like, at a certain point, figure it out.
Sure. Now, and we're not trying to jump the gun. Because I have these in a pecking order, so we'll get to the Dallas Colorado series. Like the reason why I'm saying is because the shoe's on the other foot now. You're the non-injured team coming into it, kind of. Like you are because of Landeskog, but you're also not because he's been available for at least one game. They didn't play him, but he was available. He was activated. So
I really think when the Colorado Avalanche, I think there's a real shot that if they go down again,
like Dallas is down their top defenseman and their top forward.
Right. And if they win that series,
right,
doesn't look good for Bednar.
That's fair. So let's put it this way. I was doing process of elimination. It's not Carberry and it's not going to be Arnell. Not a chance.
There's a chance it's Berube.
There was a little bit. I thought that might be where you've been trying to go. I like now at this point, it's not going to be San Luis. It's not going to be Travis Green. I don't think it matters. John Cooper's keeping his job. I don't think it matters. Paul Maurice is keeping his job.
If the New Jersey Devils somehow win that series, it may cost Rob.
That was who I thought you were going to say at first, honestly. That was
listen, if the Flyers do a single thing, have a single interview before the end of the first round, you're stupid. Because if Rod becomes available, you interview Rod.
Well, here's the interesting thing. Their hands are somewhat tied right now. Like the interview they're going to do, or is interview, I'm going to say it like this, interview, is they're going to talk to Brad, and
I'm sure they
take care of that. Let's just say they're not even going to talk to Lappy, because he's coaching in a playoff series in the AHL. They're not even going to do that right now. The only guys
they may talk to his agent a little bit.
Well, you know what I mean. I'm saying, like, they're not going to try to worry about whether or not he wants to move up while he's coaching in the AHL actively.
Right.
You wait until guys' seasons are over and then you bring this stuff to a head, which to me means that the only other guys that I could think of, like, because I've seen it floated around, like with the Flyers, like there's a lot of ideas of reunions happening. Because there's a lot of people who immediately, when Peter Laviolette got fired, and I'm not saying there's people who connected him to Philly, but there were a lot of people who connected John Tortorella. No, but there were a lot of people who connected John Tortorella to the Rangers again.
That's fair. I could see Laviolette back to Nashville before he comes back to Philly.
I just don't think. Here's the thing: the reason why people connected Laviolette to Philly is the exact same reason you're connecting Rick Tocchet.
Because he played with Danny Briere. He's been here before.
Coached Danny Briere.
He's been here before.
And if anybody's gonna know what kind of coach he is, it's a guy who played for him. So, and valid. But to me, if you're coming from an angle of communication and teaching, I'm not going to sit here and say that, well, you know what, though? You kind of don't want to hire the guy who just within the last 3 weeks sat there and said, I didn't even talk to them after the game. Like, what was your message? I didn't have one because I didn't talk to him. And he was out of answer, so I get that. But
and I have heard that is not particularly uncommon, that some coaches just don't go into the room after losses.
Yeah, you know who they all are?
Okay.
They're all the older guys, because every one of these teams, how many times do I have to watch a video of Carolina in the room afterwards? Carberry's in the room after every Washington game. So I've seen those. I've seen it with, like, and I'm trying to think of anybody else who I've seen it with for sure. I feel like Bruce Cassidy does it, and he's an interesting name to bring up. In, by the way, to your question, I didn't think about him actually, though, in that sense. The other name I was going to bring up, because to me it was either going to be Brindamore, or, you know, who I can see being a little bit of threat if
Yeah.
and man, we love hitting on former Flyer references. The net is too big at this point to not do it. If Edmonton gets bumped in the first round, though, do you think they think about Chris Knoblauch? Like not being there, I mean.
No.
You don't think that his job's not on the line?
Here's the thing. Until Connor signs his extension, you kind of have to do whatever Connor wants. And if Connor wants his old junior coach there, his old junior coach is going to be there.
That's true, but I'm just saying.
I gotta say, man, you cannot risk pissing off Connor McDavid before you sign the biggest contract extension in franchise history. And yes, I know that this franchise had Wayne Gretzky.
Okay, fine. Let's say because they're able to do it, I think after July 1st this year, right? Because as soon as it's within a year, they could extend him.
They extend Connor at noon on July 1st and they fire Knoblauch at 12:30.
No, my answer would be if they don't get out of the first round, is the seat red hot going into 25, 26?
Oh, absolutely.
And then you don't worry about it because you'd have him under contract and then sit there and say, listen, Connor,
you think you have him under contract.
Well, no. I'm saying if they do get the extension done and go into next year knowing it, and then you sit there and go,
if they get bumped in the first round and Connor McDavid says, I'm not signing an extension.
Yeah, well, the only reason I don't know if I buy that completely, like I understand where you're coming from. Of course he could do that. Of course. The only thing you need to do if you're Edmonton is ask how much. The question is if you ask you to jump, say how high.
Oh, see, I don't think that's the question. I think the question is how long. Can you get him for 8, or does he sign like a 3 and try to cash in again when the cap is jumped for $30 million?
Yeah, you never know.
He's young enough that you can sign a 3 and then still sign 8 after that, and just be Sidney Crosby and play until you're 610.
If you're playing until 610, if you're and your name's Sidney Crosby, you're not doing.
You might have a shot at the goal rack.
All right. Anywho, let's get into these playoffs. Yeah. So let's see where we start.
I was going to say you said you had a pecking order here, so I'll let you throw the first one up.
Yeah. All right. There we go.
Ooh, we got. Okay.
Yeah, I told you we came with the production value today.
So this is the Washington Capitals versus the Montreal Canadiens. This is the number 1 seed in the Metropolitan Division against the second wild card by virtue of the Washington Capitals winning the division. I'm going to try to make my picks as agnostic to what's actually happened in the series as possible, because we were supposed to do the show before the playoffs started. And before the playoffs started, I'll go ahead and start this one. Before the playoffs started, I looked at the first round and said, yeah, maybe 1 sweep, and this is it.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
That's not true. I said maybe 2 sweeps, but they were both in the Metropolitan Division because the Devils are frauds. But we'll get there. So I did have this one in either 4 or 5. Washington's just a better team. I may have underestimated Demidov just a touch. He has been phenomenal since he's come in. But overall, I think Washington should probably win this series. They have been the better team through the run of the regular season. They're just a better team top to bottom. Montreal's on their way, but this feels like they should lose but get valuable playoff experience.
Was that your pick? So was that your pick, Washington in 4, but you're doubting it a little?
I'll go Washington in 5. I think I had Washington in 4, but yeah.
So all of my picks here's like, I'll preface it with this. All of my picks are based on before the series started. I stuck with my guns on everything, but I did have a thought watching game 1 that I will share on here, so I'll make the pick first and then I'll tell you what the thought was. Because I do love the Montreal story. I thought it was great for them to make the playoffs with the core that they have.
Not as good as Columbus's story, but we'll take it.
No, it wouldn't have been as good as if Columbus had made it. But I do think that this, like the way they've built their team, it's a testament to that.
Yeah.
They were at one point in time they were left for dead, kind of in the middle of the season too, and because for a little while we thought there was going to be a coaching change there. I doubt it now. Obviously, I think they're satisfied with Martin and Louis, getting them into the playoffs. So they've got it. They're going to have success in the future because you like the way their makeup of their team is, and this was not a prediction in any way, shape, or form, but I wasn't going to pick against the team that had Alex Ovechkin given the way the regular season went. So I picked Washington in 6 in this one. And there's a reason why I feel better about that pick now after game 1 than I did before, was because as I was watching game 1 and it was competitive, and Montreal actually did get it to overtime in this case. But as I'm watching it, I'm going, do you know what this is? This is the Flyers playing the Capitals in 2016. This is one team's getting an idea of, oh, this is what the playoffs are like. And
Which is
another
really
team is
funny. Which is really funny because the next year Washington played the first year of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the first year of the current iteration of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's just the same exact thing. It's just kids getting experience against Alexander Ovechkin
right.
and John Carlson.
Yeah, except for the part where Ovechkin does something he's never done before in his career in game 1.
Fair enough.
You know, like the guy who only has more goals than anybody else ever.
Well, then years later, they played the Carolina Hurricanes in the first round, and it was another lesson teacher. He
Yeah.
knocked out Andrei Svechnikov cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, the Washington Capitals are really the grandfathers of the Eastern Conference.
So that's my pick. Anyway, that's my pick. Washington in 6.
All right, let's move along. I assume you probably have the next Metro series here. Yep.
Yes, we do.
Carolina and the New Jersey Devils. I'm just gonna go ahead and spoil it because the Devils are frauds, and it's
go for it.
It's sweet. 4-0. Devils are frauds. 4-0. Sweet. We're done.
And
Carolina second round.
I always do the courtesy thing. So Carolina in 5. But again, after game 1, you're not wrong. This is
Canes in 3.
This is Carolina is winning this series, no doubt in my mind. Can we just jump to the second round, please?
And that is why I mentioned earlier that if something were to happen and the Devils were to win this series, you might look at letting Rod go. But anyway, we're moving on to the next. Right, we're moving on to the next series because it's going to take that.
Okay.
We go to the Atlantic Division. We're staying in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
The Atlantic Division champion Toronto Maple Leafs, for the first time in their franchise history. They won the Canadian division a couple of years ago. They won some divisions before it was the Atlantic, but this is their first time in franchise history winning the Atlantic Division, going up against the first wild card team in the East, the Ottawa Senators. Now, this is a series because on paper, it looks very similar to Washington, Montreal.
Yes. Well, and guess what? So did game 1. Or game or well, yeah.
But paper doesn't account for the Toronto Maple Leafs being the Toronto Maple Leafs.
It doesn't.
Or Brady Tkachuk being Brady Tkachuk, because as good as the Washington Capitals are, they don't have a player quite like that.
Right.
Especially once we get deeper into a playoff series and murder becomes legal.
Yeah, if it hasn't already. Because it's pretty darn close sometimes.
Frankly, it was pretty close at the end of the regular season with that Darnell Nurse cross-check only being 1 game, but okay.
Yeah, and then somebody got one right to the chops later. So same concept.
Crazy.
Anyway. Okay, did you want to go ahead and make your pick?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, because I'm spoiling. You'll get it. There's a hint for what my next pick is from this because I'm trying to speak this one into existence. I want the Tkachuk Bowl.
Okay. There was a period of time where it looked like we might get that as a result of the regular season, right? If the Florida Panthers had won the division and they ended up here.
Yeah, and then both Tkachuk brothers didn't play down the stretch. That's what happened.
Well, right. And I wonder if they did that on purpose. They didn't have to play each other first. But anyway, we end up here. Okay. So just because you want the Tkachuk Bowl to happen, does that mean you're taking the Ottawa Senators to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I said I'm trying to speak it into existence. So I said Ottawa in 6. So I'll stick with it. I also didn't love the way Toronto was playing coming into the playoffs. I felt like there was that vulnerability there again. And I could be totally wrong. The one thing I will say is, and I based on game 1 is Toronto's got the experience and Ottawa does not. And it sure looked it there. And Ottawa is going to have major problems if goaltending is an issue.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because I have a 2-part prediction for this series.
Oh.
And the second one will tease some good stuff for you as we move deeper into the playoffs.
Okay.
Leafs in 6.
Okay.
Anthony Stolarz wins the Conn Smythe.
Whoa.
There you go.
By
There you
the
go.
way,
And that's
yeah, well, I was gonna say, by the way, if you really want a dose of former Flyers, watch this
man.
series.
Oh man, it hurts so bad watching Claude Giroux and Scott Lawton chirping each other.
Claude
Oh,
Giroux,
it hurts
Scott
so
Laughton,
bad.
and for good measure, because I really actually didn't know Stolarz was going to be the goalie that they went with. I thought Wall would be.
Oh no,
Um,
I knew Stoley would be. He's been their guy all year.
and then on top of
Yeah.
it, go ahead and pick all the ex Flyers kids that are playing in this series too.
It's
Apparently,
weird. Yeah.
or just pieces of ex Flyers lore, because you could do the same thing with Domi on the other side. Like Max Domi's
Well,
playing.
right. Well, that's what I'm talking about with the Flyers being one of those franchises. I mentioned it earlier, right? They have their fingerprints all over this league. And
Right.
yeah, you really see it here.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
know.
I have the Leafs in 6. If it goes to 7, I don't think they win it.
This
But,
was
but I think they take care of it 6.
and in fairness, and this isn't really spoiling any, like, because I'm not spoiling anything with this. It's just this really felt like my go out on a limb upset pick more than others.
Okay.
Like, if most of the other ones, if I said something like it's way more, it just makes way more sense when I pick the other teams. Like every other pick, it probably makes a lot
Well,
more sense.
and that's why I mentioned that this series on paper looks a lot like Washington Montreal,
Right.
because it does make sense. And then you take it off paper and you realize it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the upset becomes a lot more real at that point, right?
Right.
You're like, okay,
So
that this team is capable of losing to inferior teams in the
of
playoffs.
course. So all right.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears to the
All right, moving along. One more
other.
matchup in the Atlantic. It's going to be the Battle of Florida. You mentioned the Kachuk Bowl. We have the Florida Bowl here.
Yes.
The Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers, 2-3 in the conference. Uh, we've seen this recently in the playoffs.
Yeah. Sure
We've seen it
have.
a lot in the regular season. These teams don't like each other. Games 5, 6, and 7 are going to be absolute gong shows if we get there. Kevin, what do you got here?
Florida in 6. I'm not picking against the defending Stanley Cup champions. I do respect the fact that this is a tight series, or could be a really
Yes.
tight series,
It
because
might be, if you have it in 6, it might be 6 1-goal games. 4 of them are in overtime.
sure.
Like,
And
it's that
and
kind of series.
and it's why I'm not going to fault anybody who's picking the other direction here. Like, I see your logic. I just can't pick against the Florida Panthers in this situation. I just think that is, and here's the thing. I really, for a long time, I did think 7. I picked 6 because it will go back to Florida's home arena for game 6.
Sunrise. Yeah.
I'm just thinking there's going to be something there where that's where it ends. It's just my guess. Like, I could easily see it going.
Yeah.
I could easily see it going 7. Obviously.
It's one of those series where it's really tough to control enemy fan ticket purchases.
Yeah. Well, they can't.
Right. At all, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think home ice matters from an on ice perspective. And obviously, there are going to be crowd majorities, but I don't think it's as impactful in this series as it is in
No,
series with more geographical distance.
and I'll add in kind of part for my part of this pick anyway was I feel like Florida's still in their window right now, and Tampa's is like still on that back end, because it's still it's still most of the same guys. I do think that there are guys who have stepped up and had great years that are on that weren't part of those cup teams, like Jake Gensel and Brandon Hagel. I get it, like you're teetering towards that, but
Well, why? Okay. Last year, why did you think the Tampa Bay Lightning were old?
well,
Because it's
sure,
Steven Stamkos.
partially. I thought Victor
And I know Hedman's a little older too, and I
Right.
know all of
Hedman had
that.
mileage, and that was what bothered me. He's looked better this year. I'll give him credit for that. And if Vasilevsky can be Vasilevsky prime, then
But and if you traded age-wise on your roster, you trade Stamkos for Gensel, that slides you right back into your window, as far
yes,
as I'm concerned.
sure.
And
So we'll
also,
see.
Andrei Vasilevsky has been the best goalie in the world for a large chunk of his career. There's an argument that he is that right now, but I don't necessarily think so. But he has been there or very close to there for a large chunk of his career. That is why I have the Tampa Bay Lightning in 7.
One more caveat on my pick also, which is I'm not someone who changes throughout the course of things. So
Right.
I had Florida in the Cup final at the beginning of the year, so I stick with
Okay.
that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Regardless of what recency tells me.
I think I had the Rangers in the Cup final.
You
So
did.
that one didn't
I'm
work
almost
out.
positive
Yeah.
of that because it was somebody who didn't make it.
Yeah.
You had a
Yeah.
year this year like I had last year, because last year I had
Yeah.
the Devils in the final.
Yeah.
And they didn't
Whereas I
even
knew
make the
early
play.
on that they're frauds.
Last year, I think we were all surprised by how bad they were, though. Like, at least this year, like, I'm sitting here looking, going, I'm not impressed, but they're a playoff team. I can't take that away from them. Anyway,
But, all right, that is the Battle of Florida.
We're on to the
I
West,
believe.
right?
I was going to say we are moving out to the Western Conference here, starting with the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues. This is the number 1 seed in the Central Division versus Wild Card 2. The Winnipeg Jets won the West. Were in competition for the President's Trophy all the way down the stretch. But the St. Louis Blues were one of the hottest teams in the NHL coming down the stretch. Stop me if you've heard this before.
Sure.
So this is a tough one.
With an interim head coach, or not an interim, with a new coach halfway through the year.
Replacement head coach.
Yes,
yeah.
Right.
It turns out Colton Parayko and Jordan Binnington don't know how to play under an old head coach.
Anyway,
turns out Jordan Binnington might clash with some people after a while, but okay. Moving into the series, again, this feels a lot like the 1 seed matchups in the East, where there is a better team. Obviously, in this case, the wildcard team has a little bit of momentum, so that does give it some legs, I think. I have the Winnipeg Jets winning this. I do think it takes at least 5. I'm gonna go 6.
That is, not to spoil it, but it is what I have. I have Winnipeg in 6 also. I feel pretty good about it after 2 games, by the way.
Fair enough.
I picked that for one very simple reason. It's not going to be the sole reason when we're all said and done with this thing, but I picked it for one very significant reason, and that's Connor Hellebuck.
Turns out he's good.
Right. That's about all I got. That's about all I got for this one. Now I'm gonna do something. We're gonna go to the next one, but
okay.
I gotta bring something up here as we get into this, because to this point, there's something to this point that I have not done yet, that I usually tend to do a lot more when we get to this, because these first round, especially the first round, it's kind of crazy usually, right?
Oh yeah.
So if you've noticed to this point, this is 5 series we've gone through, and I haven't done this yet. What is it?
Be anything.
I haven't picked a series in 7 yet.
Okay.
Like, we did the entire East side, and I was done in 6 across the board. And I just picked Winnipeg in 6, obviously.
So this one's going 7, I take it.
It is, and I'm going to tell you, this was the toughest one for me, because with all of the information going in, I made my pick based on, if you're a listener of the show, then you know where I'm going to go with this, because going back to October. But and I can't stray from that, but I easily had the most doubt I've had about any pick in this one, because it's just almost not fair to tell a team that has the roster makeup of the Dallas Stars, Miro Heiskanen's out, at least to start the series. And then, oh yeah, by the way, the literal last game of the regular season, yeah, you're going to lose Jason Robertson too. Sorry about that. And oh yeah, that team on the other side that you're going to play, their captain's about to come back.
After 3 years,
Yeah.
like, the boost in that locker room had to have been, like, listen, I assume the dopamine hit from Gabe Landeskog walking into that room to play has to have been similar to the dopamine hit of Oscar Lindblom walking into that locker room to play. Obviously a little different,
right?
But it has to be a similar boost to your morale.
So I will fully admit that Game 2 made me feel better about this.
Okay.
Because it at least restored.
Okay.
Well, because it restored my faith in the fact that it could be a long series.
I think it's definitely a long series.
Well, because I'm sitting here looking at Game 1 and I'm going, oh boy, you take those 2 pieces off of this team. They don't even have and Colorado don't even have Landeskog back, and look at this, But okay, it's an even series. I'm going Dallas in 7 because Dallas was my pick at the beginning of the year, and I got to stay true to that. And But you know my rule with 7-game picks. It could go
anything
either
goes. Way. Yep. And I think two things. I'm going to spoil it. I agree with you. Dallas in
Okay.
7. And I think two things are the major factor. I think we both think it's going to be a long series. These are two very good teams that are going to battle it out. Game 7 comes down to being in Dallas
Okay. Like
and Jake Ottinger. And
look,
Jake Ottinger.
they definitely by far have the goalie, and don't get me wrong,
That dude.
Mackenzie Blackwood was excellent in game 1, but if it shifts and Ottinger is the guy who's able to stand on his head and
When
Colorado's
the
lacking in goaltending, yes, I hear you.
when the current generation of elite veteran goaltenders ages out, right? Your Connor Hellebuck, your Linus Holmark's not exactly elite anymore, but like somebody, even Andrei Vasilevsky, as he gets a little older and maybe slows down a little bit,
Right.
Jake Ottinger's on his way up. I'll tell you that right now. Listen, we're sitting here, April 22nd, 2025. This fall, pick Jake Ottinger for your fantasy team. I promise you.
Yeah.
Promise you. It's gonna go well. Okay. Regardless, I do have the Dallas Stars in 7 here. Like you said, Game 7's a bit of a coin toss. Anything can happen.
Yep.
But if Miro Heiskanen's back by then I'm going to feel even more confident with it. But I do have Dallas winning this one regardless.
Perfect.
So, yeah,
On to the next one.
one more division to cover here. Two more matchups. The last division winner we have to talk about here is the Vegas Golden Knights. They will be going up against the Minnesota Wild, who are wild card 1 in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Again, man, it's the first round. These are all good matchups. Like the
Yeah.
great thing about the NHL playoffs is that the first round is insane, and then every round gets more important.
Yeah.
And maybe not necessarily better. But, guys get hurt. The style of play breaks down a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially if the Boston Bruins are in the finals. But things tend to slow down a little bit later on, and the first round and the second round are really where you get the premium matchups, and this is one of them to me. Like, I think this matchup is so much fun.
Yeah. I see. This is the opposite of the Dallas Colorado series to me, because this is about it. To me, this series gets infinitely more interesting because of guys that Minnesota is getting back at the right time versus guys who were out at the wrong time. It's these guys are coming back. Vegas is always this kind of, and I do agree. There's an element where Vegas is kind of this lurking in the weeds team this year that not a lot of people are talking about for a division winner. Like there is totally that.
Yeah.
I will fully admit I have the upset radar on this one a little bit, like in terms of like I can see it. So it did influence my pick a little bit, but it didn't change who my winner was. So I still have Vegas winning the series, but in 7, because I think that this is nowhere near an easy series for
Okay.
Vegas to get to the next round. I think that this is going to get real interesting when you think of Kaprizov comes back right before the season ends. Eriksson Ek comes back right before the season ends. Zeev Boyum debuts right. Hello, here you are. Welcome to the playoffs.
Right.
And there's just a vibe about Minnesota right now because of Marc-Andre Fleury, even if he's not playing, that there's just like there's something a little extra.
Throwing him in for overtime at the end of the season, crazy. Anyway,
him making all those saves in overtime, including on a penalty kill, and then winning the game was crazy.
Insanity. This series, I do think Vegas just kind of has the better roster.
Mm-hmm.
They have more deep playoff experience, and quite frankly, they're bigger jerks. And in the playoffs, that's what matters.
Yeah, kind of
And
does.
You're telling me Kirill Kaprizov's not going to get hacked to smithereens this entire series?
Oh, and they're going to look for it, of course. But
saying, they know what's wrong with them. They know where to hit them. They're not stupid, and they're enormous. They're the Monstars from Space Jam. They're going to murder people as much as humanly possible.
Right.
The Vegas Golden Knights are the reason that they don't disclose specific injuries in the NHL. That's the reason we get upper body, lower body. It's the Vegas Golden Knights. It's the Boston Bruins. It's the Florida Panthers. It's And I think they just beat Minnesota down, and I think they take this series in 6.
Okay. Like I
Yeah.
said, I'm leaning towards the skill set of some of those Minnesota guys, and there's an element where they're just constantly there.
Absolutely.
Like they
No,
don't go
Minnesota's a
quietly.
good team. Yeah, I just think they're a little bit young,
Yeah.
lacking a little bit of playoff experience,
Well,
and I think they'll get that this year.
and that's why I give the nod to Vegas, because I think that when
Yep.
it comes down to it, Vegas is gonna, they're not far enough removed from a Stanley Cup win to just bow out
Forget
to
about them.
in the
Yep,
first. Exactly. That
absolutely.
leaves us with one more, right?
One more series here. We have the 2-3 matchup out in the Pacific Division. Stop me if you've heard this one before. The Los Angeles Kings are playing the Edmonton Oilers in the first round.
Yeah, of course.
Turns out we have seen this electric boogaloo not just twice, but this is now 4 times in a row. And quite frankly, the Edmonton Oilers have won the first 3. I'm going to go ahead and continue not betting against Connor McDavid, and I'm going to have the Edmonton Oilers on this one in 6.
So I couldn't believe what I was seeing from the score in game 1 of this series, because I thought, no, come on. Like, there's no way Edmonton is gonna have that happen. They're not gonna just get walked. And then I saw what was happening as the third period went on, and Connor McDavid said, "I'm the best player in the world. Shut up."
We're not gonna get watched.
Right.
Like, do you remember
Yeah, and
every game
yeah.
they've ever played against the Calgary Flames?
True.
It's never over.
You know what's interesting about this series, because I'd love to like, game 1 was a perfect representation for one thing about this series. And I'm not going to sit here and say that means that every single one of the goals in the game was specifically geared towards this, but neither of these teams' goaltending impresses me.
This series is going to
And
be fun.
sure, and I just get like, I'm with you. I picked Edmonton for what it's worth.
Right.
But I said Edmonton in 7, which means I see the path for LA.
There's
And
a coin flip. Yeah.
quite frankly, the path for LA is Stuart Skinner.
Okay.
If Stuart Skinner is the Stuart Skinner that's been in the playoffs before, sometimes not necessarily not cup run Stuart Skinner, but maybe the year before.
Okay.
Like, you start getting that, and you got problems. I mean,
Absolutely.
that'll be the difference. I do think there's an element for LA that some of these guys now are in better shape than they would have been like a year or two ago, because
Oh yeah.
like a perfect example is Quentin Byfield. Like, now you're fully in this thing now. Like,
You're a real player now. You're not just
there's
a kid that we're taking along.
and there should be nothing that shell shocks you about playing the other side anymore. Like,
Right.
this
You
is
know exactly what Darnell Nurse is bringing at you, and guess what? It's his stick.
sure, but also I'm talking about, like, what you're in for now in this type of a series.
That's
Of
what I'm
course,
saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yep. I
but I'm
do
with you. It's
think,
hard. It's hard to bet against McDavid and Draisaitl, and
well, and I bet Edmonton, or I not bet. I picked Edmonton in 6, and I gotta say, if you go back to LA for Game 7, it's a coin toss, man. Like, if you don't close it in Edmonton, you don't want to get back on that plane to go to
right,
LA. You don't want to do it. It's a bad
right.
flight. But we will see.
Yeah,
And
we will.
yeah, and frankly, I'm so excited that it's the playoffs.
Yeah.
I cannot wait until ESPN gets themselves together and starts putting stuff on ESPN Plus so it's actually accessible. But I'm doing my best. I'm definitely not illegally streaming games. Why would you say that? Um, and as we hit
I
this,
said no
yeah.
such thing.
What do you mean? Who mentioned what?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, as we hit this time of year, this is some of the most fun we have watching hockey here, especially when the Flyers are bad, because it's
It's true,
fun.
though.
It's fun rooting for your team when they're in the playoffs. When you're as dedicated as we are here in the show, you do kind of tend to have your blinders on pretty tough, and it's hard to pay attention to other games, right? Especially Kevin going to the building on home nights, and you're probably not watching the other 7 o'clock game, and
You'd be surprised
so
some nights.
well, you know what I mean. But when your team's not in it, and you can just kind of take a step back as a fan and just really
Yeah.
enjoy it. And listen, I am not happy about the fact that the Flyers aren't in it. Do not get me wrong. But
Right,
I'm
we're all
hoping,
eagerly waiting.
right. I'm hoping that what the Flyers have building here means that we won't have to do this too many more times.
Right.
That,
Of
you
course.
know, maybe not next year's predictions, but the predictions the year after that, I want to have orange all over my bracket. And I'm not
Well,
talking about the Ducks.
true. Well, and here's the
Man,
thing. I mean,
2029 Ducks Flyers Cup final, the Gauthier,
oh,
Michkov,
Cutter.
Drysdale. Oh man.
Hey, listen. Props to Cutter Gauthier toward the end of the year for one thing, and
No
you'll
props to Cutter Gauthier.
hold
No
no,
props.
you'll
No, I know what you're
understand.
gonna. I know what you're gonna say.
What am I going to say?
You're gonna talk about the fact that he lit it up from a goal scoring perspective.
No, I'm
He
going to talk
sure
about that.
did.
I'm going to talk about that. He had like one of his best games was a game that they needed the Ducks to win.
Fair enough.
Like,
Yeah, we'll take that.
Look at you out there helping the Flyers indirectly.
Oh, that's funny.
I mean, guess what? Like, here's a callback to the last series. Everybody's going to fixate on these picks, right? Like,
yeah.
You got 2 other first round picks to be determined locations, right? To an extent. Well, you don't want them to be between 29 and 32. Let's just say that much.
At least.
Right.
Right.
And look at who scored the very first game of the LA Edmonton series. Andrei Kuzmenko. Still helping out the Flyers.
He had 3 points in that game.
Yes. He's been outstanding for the Kings since that trade happened. And think about it.
He had more points in one playoff game than Joel Farrell. Never mind.
Okay.
So, anyway, I think that is a great place.
You know what a great
for this show.
You know what a great place to call it is. We can't wait until we're talking Flyers in the playoffs, and until then, Until then, play a drinking game with us. Count the number. Take a drink every time we mention a former Flyer.
I think I'm just going to take a drink every day until the Flyers make the playoffs again. That's going to be my drinking game about this one.
But I'm having fun with the viewers because I
know
this one might be. I mean, short of when we did the brackets during COVID, this one might have been the most that we've done in a long time because I'm pretty sure that we dropped a lot of ex-Flyer names in this.
Absolutely, it's been pretty tough. So, let us know if we did it too much. You can tweet us. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. We're on all the social medias too. Like I said, it's at YWT. Follow us everywhere. Get us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. Make sure to head over to our YouTube channel. Subscribe over there. If you're watching on there, consider hitting that like button. It really helps us out. But other than that, I am very excited. It's my favorite time of the year. If you've been with us since last year, even the year before that, you know how much I love the playoffs. And I am excited to come back together in roughly 2 weeks, after this first round wraps up, and talk about really excellent, high quality hockey, as well as maybe a little bit of Flyers news. You never know. Maybe we've gotten some coaching interviews by then.
Draft lottery.
Right. We're in draft lottery territory at that point. We should at least know when it is.
By that point, I'm hoping we know where they're going.
Well, that is fair. Yeah, and we may even schedule our next show around being after the draft lottery, but we'll talk about that.
Yep.
Make sure you're following us on socials to know when the next show's coming. And until then, it's been fun. We'll see ya.